sees the means of production, and the like and subscribe button. What would happen? It's difficult to say exactly. The whole point of lowering the interest rate is that it lowers the cost of borrowing money. It makes it easier to do stuff like get a cheap mortgage with a low interest rate, car payments. But on a macroeconomic scale, the main effect that it has is it allows banks, financiers, hedge funds, everyone who already has a ton of money to borrow money from the government and from the banks very, very, very easily and reinvest it. It makes gambling easier. It makes gambling on the economy easier. It means that the amount of money that gets floated around in this speculative financial bubble above the real economy gets larger and larger. And in this case, the problem is that normally when you drop the interest rates like so, what you're encouraging companies to do, what you're encouraging the private sector to do, is to start spending and buying, to start investing. You're trying to stimulate that economic growth, but there's a cost. In many cases, the cost is at the government's expense. You know, the government has to incur a lot of debt in order to facilitate that kind of growth. Basically, it's inflationary, and it would very, very rapidly increase the negative economic trends we're already experiencing, where not just with inflation, but also like the big debt bubble that we don't really have a solution for. You know, typically the government only drops interest rates very low when times are desperate. They really want to incentivize private investment, you know, buying up debt. They really want to stimulate the economy. Like the Japanese government historically has had very low interest rates because they want people to borrow, but companies in Japan won't borrow because they're all terrified of having debt. In America, our companies are not terrified of holding debt. So, you know, that first reply, what the fuck are they saying? Who knows? Surely it's working for Japan. Well, in Japan, the private sector won't borrow because everybody in Japan is still traumatized from their economic crash back in the 80s and 90s. They don't want to hold debt. They borrowed relentlessly. They spent. They held a lot of debt, but their investments were paying back more. And then when the economy crashed, all those companies were holding a lot of debt with no ability to pay it back. So what did they do? They hunkered the fuck down and spent years, sometimes decades, paying back their debt. And as a consequence of so many of these companies having a recent history of needing to pay back debt over that long a period of time, nobody's willing to borrow money. So the economy of Japan remains relatively stagnant, at least in a capitalistic sense, but the real economy of Japan is actually quite vibrant. That is to say, you can go into Tokyo and see evidence that people are making things, people are buying things. But on a macroeconomic scale, in terms of like corporate borrowing and like the returns on investment and the accumulation of capital within the country, government bonds getting purchased, stuff like that, the country has been falling behind for a long time. That seems nice, though. I genuinely think, like, if you took the Japanese private sector attitude towards borrowing, which is to say, don't, but then you put it in a country that had a robust local economy and not a bajillion dollars of government debt, you would have a very, very healthy country that would feel very good to live in. Seriously, if somebody could snap their fingers and make the Japanese government solvent, right? Like if they could basically eliminate the Japanese government's debt, just pay it off, and that's that, and maybe maintain like a small amount of debt for complicated reasons, you know, but like a small amount, not the amount they have now, Japan's economy would be pretty good. There would be problems, certainly, with like lack of labor supply and the population crisis and stuff, but in terms of, you know, I mean, it'd be better off than us in that respect, I feel. Japan's situation is weird. Almost 90% of its debt is held on by its own citizens. Yeah, because that debt is a remnant from when people were buying up their bonds crazy style during that period of like really high borrowing and debt incurring, like reinvestment, you know? Also, they've had the interest rate so low for so long. Do we do that here in Scandinavia? Scandinavia isn't a country. Norway, then? Sure, let's take a look. Norway, Fed interest rate. The benchmark interest rate was recently lowered down to 4.25%. That's probably a good sign. That's a relatively high interest rate, at least compared to the United States, which means that they are not hurting for private investment. They don't feel a need to lower interest rates to make the cost of borrowing money lower. Generally speaking, the higher the interest rate, the happier I am, because it makes it more. So that does make it suck to get a mortgage, admittedly, but it also means the government doesn't feel a need to stimulate private sector investment. So, like, generally speaking, I support the consequences of a high interest rate. Norway also, I think, has budget surpluses. You know, it's one of the few countries that actually maintains a national sovereignty fund. Full staff announced, apologize for raising the price of the ice bar by only 9 cents. See, I don't like stuff like that because I do hate how subservient Japanese service culture is. I do hate that, you know? In Japan, if you tell a waiter to kill themselves, they will. It's pretty fucked up. Yeah, the customer is always wrong. That's my mantra. Apparently, if you go in France or Italy, if you're a tourist and you go to a cafe, you can just sit there waiting for 30 minutes while everyone ignores you. And if you go up to the front and ask directly, like, hey, can I get like a such and such, you know, they'll make fun of your accent. So that to me is the right relationship. That you know, service staff are supposed to have with their customers. Data like this is more complicated than how do I put this? Data like this is a little bit, it's too complicated for me to like boil it all down to a simple set of cause and effect variables, right? Generally speaking, whenever there's an economic crisis, the interest rates are lowered to encourage more private investment. Here you have the 2008 financial crash. Over here you have COVID, where we reduced the interest rates down to nothing, you know, or the federal funds effective. Wait, did I get interest rates right? Federal funds effective rate. This is the woke way of saying the Fed's interest rate, correct? Yeah. Okay, just making sure I don't have it mixed up. And when you lower, you have the risk of inflation. You've got quantitative easing, of course. What was going on near the 1980s? Inflation. Also Reagan. Yeah, there was a stagflation period that was silly. It was pretty, well, it was bad for a variety of reasons. Thank you, Reagan. Well, this actually wasn't just Reagan. There's a lot that it's complicated, and I'm not just saying that in a way that implies I know more than you. I'm saying that in a way that suggests I don't know enough to talk about it, really. Yeah, so just to be clear, I don't want to, I'm not trying to take stolen valor here where I'm like, you know, you wouldn't get it. The only reason we were able to sustain an interest rate this low for this long was because of quantitative easing, which unfortunately we've more or less continued as a policy to varying extents, you know. Buying my car in 2016 was such a good move, lol. Yep. Russia's interest rate? Yeah, this makes sense. Probably desperately trying to manage inflation. Are they printing a bunch of rubles right now? Yes. Are they like increasing the money supply? The finance ministry placed 3.1 trillion rubles worth of bonds last year. Yep, seems like it. Russia bond sales total. You get like the total amount. 1.7 billion rubles in the 2017 bond market sale. No, that data is old. Russia government debt. I'm having a hard time finding data that accounts for the post-invasion period. Corporate credit anomaly after years of low growth. Corporate debt surges by 36.6 trillion rubles after Russia. Well, this is the corporate debt. That's not the same. Whatever. It's complicated. It's complicated. It's complicated. I'm not gonna pretend that I understand all this crap. It's the economy. Nobody understands it. Nobody knows how this shit works. Eliminating investment with debt could eliminate issues in our economy. I'm unironically, by the way, like a debt abolitionist. Like my positions on this have gotten more, I guess, extreme over time. It really does seem like it just shouldn't exist. There literally just shouldn't be debt at all, under no circumstances, for no institution. Oof, there we go. That's good data right there. Each year's growth in this is Ministry of Federal Bonds. Yeah, look at that. Look at how much it's climbing right now. See, for 2022, it spikes right here. For 2023, it continues to climb. 2024, it spikes again toward the later of the year. But 2025, it's spiking even faster. No wonder their interest rates are so high. What about government-managed lending? I genuinely think you could build a modern economy that doesn't have debt as a concept. I mean that. I genuinely think that. If there are provisions you need for life that you just get for free, stuff like housing and food and so on that get decommodified, right? You know, Medicare for all would decommodify, you know, medical care. There should be nothing you need to go into debt with. What are you replacing it with, though? You wouldn't need to replace it with any. You would have currency. You just can't go into debt. You can't hold debt on anyone else. Now, mind you, people might still interpersonally incur debt. Like, you might spot your friend $5 if you're going out or something. But we're talking like on a macro scale. You can't hold debt legally. You could never go to a court and say this person won't pay their debt to me. That's the point. There would be no legal mechanism for recovery. It's radical, but like it does kind of seem like we're sleepwalking into an economic apocalypse for no reason whatsoever, other than because we have like constructed a macroeconomic system where if you like set the numbers just right, you can borrow an infinite amount of money to invest an infinite amount of money, so you get an infinite amount of money in return. None of this money ever actually gets used for anything, but the number looks great in your bank account. Meanwhile, like, the real world burns. Like, I don't know. It's pretty bad. How would big things like houses work? I mean, I would like decommodified housing, but if you want a big house, you got to pay up front with cash. But the housing economy, the prices of housing would be readjusted to accommodate the fact that nobody can incur debt. Like, one of the reasons houses are so expensive right now is because a 30-year mortgage is standard. Like, yeah, no shit, people are going to price their houses super high if it's expected, if it's normalized that you will spend the rest of your adult life paying it off. Like you know, it's all priced in accordance with that, you know? Some people in MA towns must take 50-year mortgages. That's crazy, dude. If you buy a house at 30, you might be dead in 50 years. Jesus Christ. Yeah, and look what happened with student debt. We used to give people good educations that cost very little. Now, because we make people spend $400,000 to get the education necessary to become a doctor. Why? It's not reflective of an increase in the cost of teaching people. It's just because they realized they could do it. The consequence of debt is that people can charge you obscene rates for things you need because the cost is abstract and paid off in the future. The goal is to make everyone a permanent debt slave. Everyone's meant to have enough debt to keep them permanently stressed and working and paying it off and paying off the interest and never paying off the principal, but not so much debt that it becomes like a farce, at which point like collections just comes in. You want to hit that balance where people are like, you know, stressed out over the debt but not killing themselves, basically. And that's the whole point of the modern debt economy, the credit economy. It's sickening. It was never... it doesn't have to be like this at all. There's no reason why it has to be like this. The modern debt/credit economy was invented in the 1960s and 70s as a way to encourage an already pretty wealthy and prosperous American population to spend beyond their means, because people realized that if you made easy loans, like with credit cards or whatever, you know, if you made them accessible to people in like regular commercial transactions, you know, why like Klarna, why pay for your groceries today when you could pay for it next month? Why pay for the car now when you can pay for whatever? You can extend that into every element of commercial life to the point where everyone's always incurring debt. The goal is to make you a debtor, right? Or sorry, to make you a debtor. If you pay off your credit card bills every month regularly, the bank hates you. You're supposed to get into debt. That's the point. They want you in debt. What if you need capital to start a business? Get a grant. If loans are impossible, the only way that people will be able to start businesses is through grants, or just by having all that money up front. But that's not new. In fact, that used to be pretty common. Back before the modern debt economy, it wasn't actually that uncommon for like, well, we want this thing in our community, so we're willing to put up for it, you know? If there was no debt, there'd be no growth, at least not in monetary terms. Who cares? You like that is and you'll pardon me for the anti-intellectual slur here, but like a capitalist delusion. Growth in a meaningful economic sense is when you don't have a chair and then a whittler carves a chair, a woodworker builds a house, somebody who can make bricks makes a brick out of clay. We don't need some number going up in like the economic, it's bullshit. We don't need like infinite number growth. It has nothing to do with human beings. You can whittle a chair. You can do that. But like, just get a grant means that only people who can start businesses are people that are in tight with the kingmakers. Yeah, dude, the debt economy has made it real easy to start a small business. You're right. Everything being priced such that every like property that you rent is $1 bajillion and everything you get is $1 bajillion, and starting a small business basically guarantees you're going to go back. It's going great right now. The world outside right now is a blighted hellscape because of credit culture. And the world you're thinking about, the one with mom and pop stores where people can like start up a small business locally, is the one I'm talking about. A world before credit took over everything. A world where it was possible for mom and pop to save up cash for a few years and buy a property and then just have a business there. You're trying to rebuild the old world using the tools of the new. I'm telling you that the tools of the new world are the reason why all of the small businesses in the Old Town Row in your town are shuttered, and the only stuff The only place people get hired at nowadays is Walmart. So-called communist wants more capitalist stores. I'm just talking about ways to make like the system as it exists now better. I'm not even talking about seizing the means of production or anything else. I'm talking about like just flatly the system we have right now sucks. Infinite capital accumulation, all the money is floating around in the fake economy. It's not like floating around down here. This is the reason why, you know, you look at the state of Mississippi and its GDP is bigger than Spain, and then you go to Spain and you see what? Small businesses, beautiful marble stone brick buildings. You see vibrant communities. You see streets that are clean because they have money to actually, like, you know, upkeep their infrastructure. And then you go to Mississippi, it looks like shit. Where's all the money? Oh, it's in the bubble. It's in the debt bubble. The money is abstract. The money is up here, you know? The money is people borrowing money to spend the money on getting more money, but it's all up there, you know? So yeah, the GDP of Mississippi might be higher than that of Spain. I don't know if it is. Per capita, definitely. And in Spain, debt doesn't exist, supposedly. Debt and credit accumulation, way worse in the US than in Spain, or almost anywhere else in the world. Yeah, for sure. I'm not saying they're immune. I'm saying that we're the worst at it. Our credit scores, the like average debt held per person, the frequency with which we incur debt, the amount of like speculative investment in America, yeah, all of these things are more advanced. They've all come further along. They're more pernicious. Yeah, it still exists in Spain, but not as much. More of their money exists in the real economy. Yeah, I promise you most Europeans don't know what a credit score is. Vaush, I was able to get 70% of unemployment benefits for 6 months as a grant to start my own business in the Netherlands. That's awesome. Must be nice to live in a real country. Yep. Mississippi's real GDP per capita was 41.6 thousand. In Spain, it's 33.5 thousand. Yeah. Vaush, that's not true. Europeans do have credit cards. I didn't say Europeans don't have credit cards. You have to respond to the words that I've said, not the words you have imagined me saying. I said that credit culture, the extent to which it's taken over, is more pernicious in America. You have to listen to the words that I'm saying. Well, I'm European. I've never had a credit card. I am 29. A lot of Europeans have never had a credit card. Only in you realize that in America, you're actively encouraged to get a credit card and to use it frequently so you can build up a credit score. So private companies can keep a database on how reliably you pay back debt because you need that in order to get a car payment or a mortgage. In America, you literally need a credit card. You need to borrow money because otherwise, unless you have an enormous amount of money, like an enormous amount of cash, you're not able to get like big purchases. Do you think it's like that all over the world? Americans who are being disagreeable right now? You think it's like that everywhere? Nobody buys stuff with debit cards over here, Kiswati. Europe has credit cards. Why are there people saying Europe has credit cards? Are you guys, genuine question, are you guys actually like mentally, are you busy doing something? Are you washing the dishes? You don't hear what I'm saying? You're catching every other word? When the fuck did I say Europeans don't have credit cards? You need to, I'm just gonna ban you. Hold on. You have to, there are consequences to contributing to a discussion that you're not listening in, okay? There have to be consequences. You have to pay attention. I'm playing Uma Musume right now. You're interrupting a race. Ah, that's fair. Speaking of debt culture, average credit card debt in America is approximately 6,730. That's more than 4 times the average in France. America's more middle of the pack in terms of household debt to GDP. Do you mean GDP per capita? Household debt ratio in selected countries as percent of GDP. Is this like the total? That I don't think this is really relevant to what we're talking about. Yeah, total loans and debt securities issued. I think this is like a broader statistic that conflates a lot of variables. Germany, for example, has only 0.09 credit cards per person. Really? That's crazy. Guy in Canada lost his credit score because he didn't use credit cards for 2 years. Equifax wiped out his credit score, and a little-known policy means he can't get it back. Sorry, dude. You lived responsibly and saved your money and didn't incur debt for 2 years. You're a non-person now. You could never again can you buy. Thank you, Kirikou. Oh, anyway, sorry. How do I title those rambles? What am I? And people were scared of social credit? Well, they still should be. Okay, let me close all these tabs.